All right, it's 2 o'clock Eastern. Let's get the party started. Start the clock. There we go. 20-minute sprint training. It is exactly as advertised. So if this is your first time with us here on the triple session 20-minute sprint, it is that we keep to our word, 20 minutes. So we're going to get in, we're going to get smarter, we're going to get out, we're going to get back to selling, especially now we get the first day of the month. So we want to make sure to capitalize on the time. I've asked Brian to stick around for another 10 minutes afterwards. We blocked the full half hour. He and I will be here to field some questions in the chat. So if you have some stuff that comes up over the next 20 minutes, pop it into the chat. If we don't get to one of your questions, because we had a lot of people on board here, we have a nice Slack community that we have developed to jump in there. There's a little Q&A channel in the Slack community. So if for whatever reason we can't get to you today, I'll make sure to get back to you if the question's for me, or I will chase down Brian and get the answer from him and pop it in there. So we handle everybody's questions and make sure nobody is left out. Without further ado, though, I'm really excited about this one. Brian and I were just chatting a little bit. If you follow his content, and hopefully most of you here do, you know that he has been to hell and back with sales. He has been in it for a while. And for some reason, whenever I talk to anybody at Gong, I feel like it's like the NSA of the sales world. Like they have more data on us than anyone else. We just get a little sneak preview into all of the really smart stuff that's going on behind the scenes. And Brian's here to give us a window into that. Brian Lamanna, four-time President's Club, Gong, former SDR, crushing it as AE. Welcome to the 20-minute sprint, my man.
Thanks, Matt, for having me. I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. Again, it is 20 minutes. We're going to give some power-packed protein here as far as best practices. Getting into connect calling, cold calling, especially as we talked about earlier. The BDR world and the cold calling world is the hardest job in sales. Handling objections during the cold call is the hardest part of the hardest job. So we're tackling the center of the universe here. Let's start generally high level with the objections at such an early stage in the process. What's unique about these types of objections? Because it's not like a pricing objection after you've built rapport and you've got a champion. It's not a competitor objection. It's really early on, right? So what is the unique flavor of these types of objections?
Yeah, I think the unique part for me is that the objections aren't always real. Matt, imagine if you get off this 20-minute sprint, you have 5 minutes before your next meeting and somebody cold calls you. You might just be trying to get them off the phone. It's not necessarily whatever you say as that first objection is totally real or is deep rooted in why you don't want to take that additional meeting. So I think that's what adds a little bit of level of complexity is they weren't expecting your call. They probably saw a local number or one that they recognized. Maybe they thought it was their son or daughter at school, or they thought it was an appointment they had set up. So that's really the challenge, is just their intent when they picked that up wasn't to take the meeting originally. So it's on you to actually dig in and probe a little bit deeper and just not take everything at a surface level.
So it's a knee jerk in some of these instances, right? I'm just giving some initial resistance and it's not a true objection. What are some of the more common ones that you're hearing even today?
Yeah, I think the 6 main ones that I have bucketed out is number 1 is budget. Number 2 would be timing. 3 is just kind of a vague, like, I'm not interested. They're not really giving you a reason. 4 would be wrong person, or they don't think they're the best person to take that meeting. 5 is they want more info, or like sending them an email first. And that's 6 is they already think they have something that totally solves for whatever you just pitched. So already have a solution, already have a competitor, at least from their world, they think that.
Okay. So I know you're going to drop some knowledge on us on how you unravel this and move through them and overcome. Before we get there, give us some cautionary tales, whether they're from your personal experience or just what you've seen other SDRs or AEs doing that doesn't really land. What's the stuff that we need to avoid, or the stuff that you tried and it really didn't work too well?
Yeah. I think the cautionary tales, I'm going to arm everyone with like a framework and actual talk tracks and how to handle those 6. But that's only a certain amount of the equation. If people have seen on LinkedIn or what Gong publishes or other things, like the tonality and the tempo is as important as the actual words you're saying. So just try to slow it down, keep the confidence. Sometimes hard to teach immediately. It takes some practice and some repetitions per se, but biggest thing I'd caution is taking some of these talk tracks and then going in 100 miles per hour blazing or thinking it's going to immediately, blow the world if you don't have a lot of that confidence and rigor behind it.
So you're going to give us a framework, practice, and it sounds like from what you're saying, a lot of the cautionary stuff is you've got to be prepared. You got to be practiced. So you sound confident and you come across in a way that's going to maximize success.
Exactly. Yeah. It all starts with active listening in terms of just being really attentive during that first objection, whatever it is, listening and keying in on every single word, and then kind of going into that framework, but just try to slow down a bit. And if you speed up, the odds are they'll speed up on the other end as well.
And it sounds horrible, right? It's like, you get that initial resistance. And I think we've all been there. If we've been in sales long enough, especially if you started as an SDR, as Brian did, as I did, when you're young and you're new and it's coming in and you're talking to someone who is your customer and they're older than you and they're more experienced than you, and you really want them to like you, it's easy to get flustered by that moment. And then you turn into Zippy the Pinhead and you're talking at 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? And then it's like, okay, please don't go. Here's what I want to do. You're trying to cram too much value in all at once, right? Slowing it down sounds confident. And that's really where you need to focus. It's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. It takes a lot of practice at the end of the day. You could call for an entire day, make 100 dials and maybe only get 6 or 8 connects. And you don't want those 6 to 8 reps being the only reps you get all day. So make sure if you are an SDR, even full cycle AE, try to spend 15, 20 minutes a day, just role playing with a teammate, role playing with a colleague, so that you can get 20 reps per day instead of 6. That'll just accelerate your learning as well.
But we need a framework. We need best practices. We don't want to practice the wrong way and get really good at shooting the wrong way. We want to shoot it the right way. So without further ado, help us out here. What's the framework? What can we work through with these 6 key objections that you mentioned?
Well, are you good if I share my screen too, Matt?
Let's do it. Yeah. I think I'm going to make you presenter. Let me give you the keys to the city.
Awesome. I'll try to make it do justice with it.
You're the host, my man. You're driving.
Well, let's do it. So share my screen here. Step 1 is all about active listening and then actually asking a follow-up question to whatever objection they just hit you with. And I know this might seem counterintuitive, right? At each company, you're going to learn your handles for how to tackle if they say, oh, we don't have budget, or this is poor timing. Oh, here's what you need to say. Surprise them and ask a short, concise, brief follow-up so that you can dig a little bit deeper and get beyond that surface level objection so that you can really reframe that ask. I'll give a couple of examples here, but what I tried to really nail from a cold call, objection handling perspective, is my quick handles to ask a quick follow-up question. So if they said something like, hey, Matt, unfortunately, we're on a full budget freeze until end of September. Can you just reach out then? I just want to ask a short question. I'll say, oh, wow, I'm so sorry to hear. Is the company not buying any new tech until September? If it's timing, right? This is one of our busiest times of the year. Can you just call back in Q4 of this year, in October? Say, hey, totally hear you there. What makes it the busiest time of year for you all? I just want to get them to continue talking and share a little bit more, because maybe if I then understand, hey, why is it the busiest time of the year? Maybe I can connect our solution back to that in some way to drive more of a why now and reframe my ask for their time again in terms of a meeting. So these are the 6 that I have jotted down, and I usually give some version of just oh, wow, sorry to hear, totally hear you, and then ask a short follow-up. So those were some of them from budget and timing and not interested. And then these are some of us from, hey, I don't think I'm the right person, or hey, sounds really cool, Laurel, but can you just send me an email first or more information? Or, we already have something like this today. No, thank you. So it's just kind of a quick handle to continue the conversation and get the ball rolling versus like just going into attack mode and being like, oh, no worries, you don't have budget, let's still find time, blah, blah, blah. Like, slow it down, acknowledge what they just said, and be curious. Get them to continue on and share a little bit more on why. So I call it like objection to question is always step one.
Gotcha. So if I see the question here, I see it broken down into two really specific components. One, acknowledge you heard them. Don't just blow it off. Don't just brush it off. Don't buy into it, but acknowledge it. Hey, absolutely. Or so sorry to hear that. Or, yep, I hear where you're coming from. And then immediately follow up with a relevant question.
Exactly. Yeah. Try to keep it under 15, 20 words if possible, which is why it takes that practice so that you can be brief.
And as you'd mentioned, slowing it down with this. So sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Just shoot me over an email. I'll take a look at it. Absolutely. Love to send that over. Anything specific you want to hear in that email or see in that email?
Exactly. Yeah.
Really bring it right down. They pick up the phone, right?
Yeah.
They have time.
Yeah. They're not on a 20-minute sprint like us. But,
right.
Give it that second pause. One of the things we measure here at Gong is patience, which is the amount of time from, if Matt and I were on a phone call, it's the amount of time from when Matt stops talking to when I start. And try to make that a second, 2 seconds. It'll just build more confidence in your conversation. There's actually a high correlation with the longer amount of patience and the slower the tempo and the stronger the ability to overcome that objection and ultimately book a meeting.
Yep. This is really key in the beginning here, is from what I see, and starting with this initial framework. And I think behind a lot of this, from what I've seen in the SDRs and AEs that I've worked with, the objection is just that. It's an objection, not a condition. They don't need to get off the phone with you. They just want to get off the phone with you, right? The universal sign for them having time to talk is answering a phone call. So when they answer that, they've just told you, I have at least a few minutes here to talk to you. Now, do I want to talk to a stranger who's trying to start a conversation out of thin air in the first 10 seconds? Am I excited about that? No, probably not. And that's what you need to overcome. And it's there. The time is there. It's not a condition. It's an objection. So the time is there. They've told you the time is there. It's budgeted because they picked up the phone. Can you work through it to earn your way into that pocket of time that they just told you exists through their action? Great way to start out. So where do you go from here?
Yeah. So I'll ask that, give a tiny bit of empathy, ask that short follow-up question. And then step 2 is empathy again. And then you're going to reframe it around whatever they just shared with you. So typically I'm then going to go for more of the handle per se in step 2. Occasionally I might ask one more follow-up question first if I think it would be helpful before I frame this up, but I'm going to give some empathy, reframe it, and then make the ask and then stay quiet. So what that example could look like is providing some empathy. Wow, that does sound like a really crazy time over there for you, Matt. Since it sounds like you want to see a few examples over email, I think I can do one better. Let's find 20 minutes to see it live so you have a visual to it all. In the meantime, those case studies that you asked for over email, I'll get those over to you in the next 30 minutes. And if you absolutely hate them, go ahead and decline that meeting. Does that work with you? If so, would love to find 30 minutes tomorrow or Friday. And you're quiet then. When you make the ask, don't continue to ramble, don't continue to speak, make the ask, be confident, and be quiet.
It's great. I think the key learning here is the small victories that you need to stay focused on throughout the way. First step, I just want to keep this person engaged with me and not hanging up, because they could just hang up whenever they want, right? They control everything. They've got the keys. If I can keep them with me, then how can I keep them going on just to the next step? I'm not trying to sell anything except a little bit more time.
Yeah, and in this example, it's almost like a mini negotiation too. If Matt asked for, hey, this sounds super interesting, but can you just send me an email first before I take a meeting? And I say, hey, Matt, like, of course, what would you want to see in that email? And you share one or two things like, oh, I need to see a case study or need to check out the website first. Parlay that into the ask again and say, hey, Matt, I'll do that for you in the next 10 minutes. But like, I've heard from other CEOs that seeing it live is way more impactful. So you could see end to end how we'd actually help triple whale. Does that work on your end? I'll send over that email and then we can find 30 minutes tomorrow. So just use what you learned from that additional question through active listening and reframe it to position why it makes more sense for them. Not making it about yourself, but making it for Matt.
Gotcha. And this is another key best practice that's coming through in what you're talking about here. Everyone that anyone here in sales and everyone here that's cold calling, the key advantage that you have when you get into those calls is you are an archive of information from people exactly like the person you're calling. They don't have time to talk to all those different people in the market and benchmark and know what's going on in the offices of people that hold their role in other companies, but you do. And you could reference that to build authority, build credibility, and work through a lot of this. So that's what Brian just did right there. If you were listening closely, hey, what I've heard from other CEOs is fill in the blank. And I was like, oh, okay, this guy talks to other people like me. And I want at that information. I want to know what's going on. And if I could poke the bear at a specific problem that might be of interest, now I have something that I can get some time for. Really important there that just came through that dialogue.
Yeah.
Okay. How many steps are we working on here? We're on step 2.
That's it. It's really just 2 steps. It's one, doing that active listening and giving a tiny bit of empathy and asking a probing question, and then you re-go through the ask again. So if they say no from here, you go back to step 1. It's just rinse and repeat. You start to isolate those objections. Maybe now Matt says, hey, totally hear you. You can send me over that email, but we really don't have budget for anything like that this year. I'll then go back and say, hey, I hear you. I know budgets are really tough this time of year. Like, is the team looking at any new tech through end of year? Ask a short question, you hear it again, and then empathy, reframe why it still makes sense to meet now, even though Matt doesn't have budget, and make the ask again. So it's a really simple 2-step process, just rinse and repeat and isolate over and over.
So I'm going to ask you a really important question here as we're getting close to the end. This works 100% of the time, right? Every time you use this, it turns into a meeting booked, guaranteed.
Unfortunately, no. It's I'd keep in mind that cold calling is really challenging, and that even with the best framework or the best scripting or the most practice, you're not going to bat 1,000%. There's going to be a bucket of those cold calls where if any prospect or if anyone in your org called them, they'd say yes to anyone. No matter how good you are, they're just not going to say yes to a meeting, no matter how much you nail. And then there's going to be that kind of in-between bucket where, like, if you're able to overcome a couple, if you're really confident, if you're really well researched, they'll say yes, but they also might say no as well. So that kind of middle area is what you're hoping to maximize with a framework like this, just to give yourself the best chance to convert on each and every one.
Yep. So obvious question. I was asking for that reason. It's like everything else in our profession. Nothing's a lock. Nothing is guaranteed. Most of what we do is destined for failure. Most deals, most late stage opportunities end up closed lost. So when we're talking this early on, you're likely not going to change the game by doing it just once. It's a habit. It's something that you build in and you win the deal here or there that over time changes the game for you with pipeline and ultimate results. That's how a guy like Brian LaManna gets to 4 times President's Club at Gong. It's working the details, painting the corners, the little things at each step of the process. Is it a guarantee? Nothing's a guarantee in our profession. It's maximizing results. And as Brian said repeatedly here, it takes practice. You have to be confident. You have to be ready to work at a high skilled, high speed way when you're thrust into this. The reality is you're cold calling, you make 20 calls, nobody's picked up, your brain kind of relaxes, and then boom, somebody picks up and you're not ready for it. And then you fumble and fluster and you just fall all over your words because you're not prepared for that. Okay, yeah, just send me an email. But if you handle it the right way, that just send me an email can turn into your next 6-figure deal. But you'll never know unless you start it out this way. 20 minutes goes by fast. We're at the buzzer. Brian, you shared some solid stuff here. Let's say I'm on this call right now. I loved it. I wanted to get some access to these best practices framework. Love to know what you're wrapping, what you're dropping down. How do we get in touch with you? How do we get some of this stuff? How do we find your content?
Yeah, can definitely add me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with each and everyone, as always. And I do write a weekly newsletter as well that I have linked in my bio, where I try to drop something actionable in under 2 minutes every Monday.
Fantastic. We're also going to build a summary that we send out to everyone who is a triple session member. If you're in there, great. You're going to get it into your inbox. If you're not, I just put the link, sign up. It's free. We have tons of content and training sessions on cold calling, cold call objection handling, cold call best practices, cold emailing, everything cold. We can warm it up with practice. So get in there. Again, it's all free. Takes about 30 seconds to create your account. I just dropped the link that you can do that right now if you like. Brian, thanks again so much. We're going to hang out here for another 10 minutes. I'm sure we're going to have tons of questions that come through on this topic because it's so critical right now. Everybody is looking to build some pipeline. And again, you're coming from the mothership at Gong, so you are sitting on volumes of information that I want to just break into here. If you have questions, now's the time. Let's fire them out in the chat. Let's handle them one at a time. It up. Okay, we got a lot of people from all over the place here. You bring them far and wide, all corners of the world. We've got Brazil, we've got the Netherlands, we've got Mexico, US. Okay.
Thanks everyone for joining too and investing 20 minutes of your time. If there's any questions, like happy to run through them.
What about, and thanks for everything. What about like public sector? I'm just interviewing for a position that's in public sector and, selling into public sector. So are there like objections from government, like local governments that, might differ or like objection handling might differ?
Yeah, I think outside of those like 6 main ones, I try to have, as much fall under those, like one of those 6 buckets. There could always be like a specific objection to whatever solution you're selling to that org, like, oh, we don't normally engage with those types of companies or this or that. I would still apply the same framework though, where you say something like, oh, totally hear you there. I saw you've been there for 3 years. I'm sure you know best. Why do you say X, Y, and Z? So ask that short little question, get them to tell you more information, and then maybe you can make a good assessment from there. Like, is it really, are they correct first off? And maybe it is not worth setting up an actual meeting, or provide some empathy, reframe the ask around it, and just make it again confidently around whatever you know. A little vague, but hope that's helpful, Laura.
It is. Thank you.
My big takeaway here was much more about the framework Brian shared versus the actual wording of it. Acknowledge, ask. And if you could start with that foundation of acknowledge and then move right into a question, whatever it is in your industry, your field, your customer base, that's the formula that will help turn people around whenever possible. So starting there and then just making it your own is likely going to yield the best results. We got a couple more here coming in. What was the last objection that tripped you up?
Great question, Tim, and good to see you on here as well. I think it's similar to what Jake threw in the chat. It's whenever like maybe I'm zoning out a little bit, they pick up and they hit me with something like really quick, where I feel like I'm like then flustered and your mind's scrambling to come up with a response. If they're just like, nope, not interested, and you feel like you're just like on a clock to kind of respond. So I think again, like just having those like quick handles ready to practice so that you're able to kind of take the mind work out of like how to respond, and you're able to just like really focus on listening to them, keying in on their words. But I'll kind of combine the answers here as well. Like Jake, if they just do that, like, oh, not interested, Brian, sorry. I try to give a little bit of like human candor to it as well, or try to throw in some humor. And I might just like, hey, Matt, like totally hear you. If I was getting a cold call on a Tuesday afternoon at 1:26, I probably wouldn't be interested either. Like any reason you share that. So again, giving a little bit of empathy, trying to throw in a little bit of humor if they're being stiff, and then asking a question, because something like not interested, it's not a real objection. There's something deeper to it. It might be they don't have budget for a year. It might be they already have a competing solution. You have to kind of peel that onion back. And the only way you're going to get that is via another question.
Yeah. And even not that well thought out, right? Maybe it's just, I know you're a salesperson, you're a stranger, and I don't want to deal with you right now. No, not interested. Just go away. Without knowing anything. Don't know who you are, don't know what you're offering, don't know the value, don't know the price. I just know that you're a salesperson, stranger, and I just want to get back to my life. I understand what you're saying, but I'm just going to carry on living my life right now. So it's that knee-jerk reaction of not falling into the trap where it's, okay, they're giving me this resistance. It's probably going to end up nowhere anyway. All right, goodbye. And that's the devil. That is the devil on your shoulder whispering in your ear saying, okay, don't have that contentious conversation with this person. Just let it go and go on to something that's easier. Doing the hard stuff as a practice at this moment, that's what gets good salespeople to great salespeople. The little hard things along the way as a habit. Let's see if we can get to one more before we move on. Tips on how to overcome gatekeepers. I keep hearing first contacts must be made via email. Run into many of those at Gong?
Yeah, I try to get as many direct lines or mobile as possible. I know it's easier said than done, but I think just like the more you call headquarters, the more you're just not going to break through. So like try to be really intentional with like, if you do have to make 80 dials a day, prioritize the direct lines if possible. If you do get hit with a gatekeeper, just be super confident and be like, hey, I'm calling Matt. I'm following up with him. If they ask you why, it's like, yep, I responded to his email the other day, or shot him a note the other day and wanted to make sure he got my previous note, wanted to give him a try at 1:30. Just be specific and be confident, and hopefully they transfer you.
Yeah, and a lot of this comes back again to how you say things, not what you say, right? Being ready, being prepared, and having confidence. I skipped over one here. We got one more we have to get to because I promised in order. Jake, sorry for skipping over you, buddy. How do you deal with the not interested in the first 10 seconds of the call?
Yeah.
So yeah, you've just dropped, 5 seconds of verbiage on somebody trying to get them not interested.
I'd say I hear you, Matt. Candidly, I don't love making these cold calls either, and I might not be interested if I was receiving one. But for my learning, any reason from what I shared there that made you not interested, just for our notes. So again, trying to insert just a little bit of humor, a little bit of like humanness to it, and get him to continue speaking. And hopefully it's something more like budget or use another solution so I can kind of give a more specific handle around it.
Yep. And again, it comes back to the practice of effort here, being prepared, sounding confident, and just trying. Again, these deals are probably not going to happen anyway. You've got very little to lose. Worst case scenario, they hang up on you. F off, goodbye, click. You got to make the effort. You got to put it out there. And every once in a while, you turn that not interested into, okay, I'll give you some time. And the give you some time turns into that deal, and that deal turns into your quota and your president's club, and it does add up. But it's like brushing your teeth. One day of doing it is meaningless. Do it every day. It makes all the difference in the world. So you got to keep at it. We're at it. 2:30. Brian, thanks again so much. The framework is amazing. Everybody, please connect with Brian on his LinkedIn. Follow him, read his stuff. I'm an avid Lamana reader. Loved his stuff. You post every day now, right?
I do.
Yeah, I'm addicted.
Once.
So get in there. Everybody else, you do the same. Hit him up for his framework. See if you can get the slides out of him. I'll try to do it myself. Either way, I'm going to type up a one-page summary of what we went over. This session will be live on our site under the sprint section. Once again, Brian, thanks again so much.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Thanks for everyone for investing some time.
All right. Talk soon. See you.
Bye.